With God of War Ragnarok's release on PC come a lot of reviews that are straight up gobbling this game's meat, acting like it's perfect or something. But as a fan of the series since the beginning and someone who has over 100 hours in this game, I'm here to tell you everything about this game as it is because I ain't no sellout, bitch. Right off the bat, I just want to say that asking PC players to make a PSN account to play a completely single player game is the stupidest thing ever. But I guess it checks out since being stupid is kind of the norm for Sony these days. The combat system in Ragnarok is identical to God of War 4 with some changes and additions. Now you have different types of shields, there are multiple types of rage modes, and now you are also rewarded for not getting hit during combat as you build up energy and can then use it to increase your weapon's damage for a brief period. Weapons can also be charged now to perform attacks like this. And there's also these sick ass death from above moves now. Hell, for the first time since Ghost of Sparta, the series finally has a spear called the Dropnir Spear, and no, that is not a spoiler, Sony is literally using it for the marketing now. You can throw these spears and explode them, so there's 2 throwable weapons now. This adds another set of moves and special moves to your arsenal, which further opens up new possibilities for combos during fights. Oh, and some places also allow you to do shit like this. And I call that the boomerang. There's a bit more thoughtfulness that goes into fights now due to the enemies performing different types of moves, which makes it even more gratifying when you eventually get good at the game. With the addition of a new weapon and other quality of life improvements I mentioned, the combat system is still very satisfying, and not to mention that you also have the DualSense haptic feedback for some stuff now. Speaking of feedback, the developers did hear it and fixed 2 of my biggest problems with the combat from the previous game. First, the combat still isn't as brutal as the classic games, but it is definitely more brutal than God of War 4 in some areas. And at least now we have multiple finisher animations for any given enemy type. And second, enemy variety in general is improved, but more importantly, the boss variety has not just been fixed, it is awesome now. I mean, a lot of enemy types do return from the previous game, but thank God you don't have to fight the same 2 bosses over and over again for most of the game. Nope, you're not gonna waste my time this time around. There are so many cool and thrilling boss fights that make my monkey brain go happy. These are just great, man, and they're one of the highlights of this game for me.
Oh, you've done it now, Bear.
Now the combat is a lot of fun, but it isn't all rainbows and sunshine, kids, because there are some big issues here that we need to talk about. First, the difficulty still follows the same lazy ass principle where the only change is to how much damage you deal and take. My first playthrough was on the hard difficulty where I did almost everything except for the stupid ass collectible trophies, but then on my second run, which was on New Game Plus, I mostly stuck with the medium difficulty because I can't be bothered to slowly chip away basic enemies' health again because
I'm a fucking God of War.
Second, I like the fact that there's various mod tokens now, so you're further rewarded for using the skills that you have bought. But the issue is, why am I having to re-unlock many of the same moves that I already unlocked in the previous game? Like, did Kratos get Alzheimer's or some shit? Also, they absolutely butchered the user interface and made it too cluttered. Third, even with the DualSense haptic feedback, the sense of impact is actually a huge downgrade compared to God of War 4. Just look at this, man. The sound design and special effects are such a massive step back when you compare the 2 games. Now the weapons feel like they have no weight to them, especially the Leviathan axe.
What the hell is even that?
I remember being blown away by the straight oomph this weapon had in the previous game, but now it just feels like a regular stick. Runic attacks like the magnificent Hyperion Slam did not make a return. and the moves that got replaced with others are all pretty much worse than what we used to have. Don't get me wrong, the combat still feels good to play, but it is just not up to par with God of War 4 in terms of game feel, which is very important to this series. Fourth, the hand-to-hand or shield combat skill tree is completely gone, and the multiple types of shields are kind of a scam since they just took the functionality of the OG shield and split it across multiple types. They also removed and messed with some of the best shield moves from the previous game for absolutely no goddamn reason. Another thing is that now when you try to do finishers when barehanded, Kratos automatically calls the axe in this game. What the hell, man? What happened to Kratos literally ripping enemies apart with his bare hands? The shield combat overall feels like kind of an afterthought, especially when you get the drop near spear because it is mapped to the same button and you have to press twice to go barehanded, which causes a delay. So you're better off switching to it by yeeting your axe. Ultimately, you just end up feeling like there's 3.5 weapons instead of 4. This is just sad considering how great it was as a longtime fan of the series to finally have Kratos' meaty bare hands as a switchable weapon in God of War 2018. And finally, as I said, I do like the new additions to the combat, but man, it is all so safe and predictable. I can't help but feel like they really could have done more with this combat system this time around. Sad thing is, we do get glimpses of what we used to have and what could have been. Every time I saw Kratos do these kinds of moves, all I could think to myself was how much better this game would have been if it had aerial combat like the older games. What I'm trying to say is, hashtag bring back the jump button. By the way, if you're enjoying this video till now, please be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot and I'll really appreciate it, my dudes. Now the raw graphics aren't too different from God of War 4, but they are definitely a bit better. This is genuinely one of the most beautiful games ever made. It is one of those cases where graphics meet an actual art direction, which is a spectacle to behold. The PC optimization is still a bit iffy at the time of this video, but on PS5 it never dipped below 60 FPS, and even on the base PS4, performance never dips under 30 FPS, which is really impressive. Where the visuals actually get to flex themselves is with the different locations. In God of War Ragnarok, all 9 realms are accessible now. Even when you visit locations you had already visited in the previous game, they still offer differences to reflect the toll of time. No one can escape it, boys. Now, do I find the locations as iconic and as memorable as God of War 2, where some places will remain ingrained in your memory forever? Hell nah, but that doesn't change the fact that visual variety on display here is also super impressive. God of War Ragnarok follows the same semi-open world approach and progression system as God of War 4, where you have various small open worlds which you can explore freely, except they are much larger in size now, just like my dick. The music is still second to none, and every location has its own distinct soundtrack. Like, if there's one thing that I really can't glaze enough about this game, it's the music, man. Exploration is as rewarding as ever due to the bigger size of location. Yes. Oh man, this feels like it was specifically designed for people like me, and is combined with a few more options in the progression system. There are also way more side quests now, but more importantly, God of War Ragnarok has some of the best, most meaningful side quests I've ever played in a game. Like, they are so much better than the main quests of most games we get today. The feeling you get when you're just exploring and stumble upon some of the best parts the game has to offer is what makes this kind of game special, and unlike fake breasts, God of War Ragnarok delivers on this in terms of quality and quantity. Each side mission is crafted to serve a purpose, whether it be amazing character building or absolutely awesome boss fights that make you foam at the mouth. But now let's talk about what's not so awesome. Mechanics wise, the puzzles are better now with more mechanics being introduced into the mix, but let's be honest here, the puzzles in this series peaked with God of War 2. But the main problem is that the reasons why you have to solve these puzzles most of the times are just retarded. Which brings me to the absolute worst part about this game, the traversal. This sort of traversal system in video games where you can only jump and climb wherever there are cum stains needs to die already. This game has a similar problem to Black Myth Wukong, where there are so many nonsensical invisible walls. Oh, you see that chest? Well, you can't go to it from here, you have to go around the whole place. Oh, you see that chest over there? Well, you can't simply go around or jump over these shields and need to unlock a special arrow type for boy to get through them. Oh, what's that? You see this chest down here? Well, Kratos can't simply go down there directly even though it's right in front of him. He has to solve an entire puzzle and then get to it from here. But forget all of that. Do you simply want to drop down from here? Well, unless there's a hole for Kratos to stick his blade into, you gotta climb down now because all of a sudden Kratos has ice cream stick legs now, even though he's shown to jump from far greater heights and not even feel it. This is artificial game lengthening at its finest. All of this shit was never a problem in the older games, but it is now because this game is designed to be restrictive and time wasting. This traversal is even more bothersome now than it was in 2018, and no, adding single button presses to make Kratos do cool animations does not do it much favor. It just serves as even more of a reminder of how good we had it back in the day. We went from literally having wings in God of War 2 and 3 to this utter nonsense. Hashtag bring back the jump button. During these moments, the writing is the only thing preventing me from turning this game off, which brings us to the story. God of War Ragnarok picks up 3 years after God of War 4 during Fimbulwinter. Freya is still mad that you killed Baldur, like get over it lol. Kratos, Boy and Mimir live in the same place, but one day trouble literally comes knocking on their door in the form of Thor and Odin.
Are you a calm and reasonable person?
They offer them a deal, but Kratos responds just like 5-year-old me did when my mom asked me to stop jumping from the dining table while I was busy being Spider-Man.
No.
This leads to an incredible boss fight, which sets in motion a journey where the characters navigate the impending doom known as Ragnarok. The rest is up to you to find out, and I will only be talking minor spoilers, nothing that hasn't been revealed in the trailers already. First off, it is great to see how relationships have evolved between all the characters, and my favorite example of this is Kratos and Mimir.
Big footprint.
Smartest man alive.
Well, you try making conversation with you sometime.
The game once again excels in making you care for its characters by giving them actual depth. Most of them I mean, but I'll get to that in a bit. You also finally get to see Kratos' late wife Faye through these dream sequences, and holy shit, that's Karen Page from Daredevil. The acting performances are once again top notch. The standout for me this time around is the actor for Odin.
You don't care about anything beyond yourself, beyond the monster who kills without cause.
Genuinely one of the most effortlessly phenomenal acting performances I've ever seen in a game. Just listening to the characters talk is one of the best parts of this game because the writing is almost always outstanding. Some of the dialogues from this game will remain tattooed in my memory forever, like I still quote some of these.
In moments of crisis, panic does nothing. Harness it. Let it serve you.
You'll just be going about your business and Kratos will drop the coldest lines known to mankind. Bro's out here giving Eminem a run for his money.
Death can have me when it earns me.
The one-take cinematography returns, and since the creators already had experience this time, it is even more impressive now. The set pieces are also absolutely fantastic. This is a much grander plot compared to the previous game, and while that does lead for some smart and very memorable moments, it also takes away from the story in some aspects. That leads us to the fuck-ups of this story. God of War Ragnarok feels like it was made by two different types of groups, where one group absolutely loves this property, while the other has no clue about what they're working on. Firstly, the pacing is just trash, and that makes it feel like this game has no clear sense of direction at times. The first game excelled at focusing on what matters because it followed the formula of simple story, complex characters. But in this game, there are so many times where the story feels like it's picking up steam, but then it just comes to a screeching halt to focus on shit that no one in their right mind cares about and just becomes a boring drag to play. Whether it be some uninteresting race swapped immersion breaking sweet baby ink inserted pile of trash, or gameplay scenarios that are less fun than making fart sounds from your mouth. Things will just be happening and you'll find yourself questioning what the hell is even the point of all of this. Now what I'm about to talk about is in the trailers already, but if you still feel like it's somehow worth avoiding, here's your spoiler warning boys, skip to this timestamp on your screen. But for those of you who are still here, let's talk bros. It is no surprise that you get to play as Atreus in this game, and on paper, that sure sounds like a cool idea. In fact, there are parts of it that are genuinely cool. But overall though, if I knew that this is what we were gonna get, I would have prayed for Kratos to be the only playable character. Everything wrong about the story and gameplay gets amplified up to 11 during the Atreus sections, including the pathetic traversal.
Good thing I like climbing.
Writing 101 here, making a joke about something that is poo-poo garbage doesn't automatically make it less poo-poo garbage. Even on the medium difficulty, when playing as Atreus, every enemy becomes a hit sponge again, your options get extremely limited, and it just turns into a PG-13 button-mashing slugfest for little kids. If you ever feel stupid, just remember that someone decided to spend time and resources on this instead of hashtag bringing back the jump button. Story-wise, it's just a bunch of uninteresting sections stretched out harder than your mom on the weekends. Like, I wouldn't have minded this that much if these Atreus parts were used sparingly, but my god, there is way too much time dedicated to them here. If you told 5 to 10-year-old me that one day I'll be spending 2 hours of my life collecting fruits while playing as another character in a God of War game, I would have straight up laughed in your face. Ain't no way this is the same game, bro. Shit is unrecognizable. Every time this game forced me to play as Atreus, I wish that I could skip this part and go back to playing as my boy Kratos. Someone please make a mod for this. I don't like some of the things that they did with Freya in this game as well, but I can kind of excuse that. But what I can't excuse is the fact that this game straight up made me hate Atreus.
If you want me to trust you, then tell me the truth.
The truth is you're being a complete asshole.
I get that they were going for a moody teenager type of character here, but they pushed too far and just turned him into a whiny little bitch, and that combined with the other stuff regarding him I talked about. For most of the story, I was just rooting for Kratos to whip out the belt of Olympus on this fool. Speaking of Kratos, I don't know what the developers were smoking, but they ended up making this game have the most inconsistent power scaling in the series. Guys, I might have found Kratos' biggest enemy. Green balls. God of War Ragnarok once again uses the miserable, talentless, and utterly hated trope of nerfing a previously well-established character to make a newer one seem like they're something. For example, right at the beginning of the game in the opening fight against Thor, Kratos dies to a blow from Mjolnir and then Thor uses it to bring him back to life to continue the fight. I'm sorry, but you're telling me that this is the same dude who escaped death twice, burnt Olympus to the ground, and defeated Zeus himself, the king of Olympus, who would have snapped this fat drunken bastard in half? This shit had me questioning if the creators even knew who Kratos is. Ain't no way my undisputed GOAT would be getting caught lacking like this. And I think the other team understood this as well and were asked to make an excuse for it, so they just have Thor say out loud that, "Ooh, this isn't the real you, stop holding back," talking like he's Drake or some shit. Although, if he was Drake, he would be more interested in Atreus instead. Man, no wonder people argue that this beast has been nerfed. It's not their fault, it's yours. It's you who can't convey your point in a meaningful way. No wonder you people had to go around in interviews talking about how he's holding back all the time. Bitch, even if he was holding back, he wouldn't just let himself die, especially when his son's life is at stake too. They just straight up lose the plot completely at times, man. God of War Ragnarok has some of the best moments in the series, and it also has some of the absolute worst. Like, I understand what the ideas were and they do work really well a lot of times, but God of War 4's story is just miles better than this game. However, Valhalla expansion story is a different case. As the name might suggest, God of War Ragnarok Valhalla follows Kratos as he journeys to, surprise surprise, Valhalla. Here he has to literally face his past as locations and enemies from the classic games make a return in a roguelike setting. I'm just gonna clean out my closet and say it, I kinda love this DLC. The roguelike gameplay system is fun and allows you to experiment with different builds, so each run offers something different. But the star of the show for me is the story. This story is such a treat for someone like me who has been with this series for almost 2 decades now. It is basically a dive into the mind of Kratos, and that gives it even more of a personal feeling than the base game story. Not gonna lie, of course nostalgia plays a part, but the nostalgic elements are handled with more care than you were as a baby. And man, hearing the OG God of War music again just gave me goosebumps. But there is one humongous problem here, and it is the fact that most of the times, Kratos has to die to restart in Valhalla. And it's not just a game over screen for the player. It's dying multiple times, presumably in canon. I've seen some people on YouTube not die on the first try, but that doesn't seem like it was intended by the developers because they legit made it borderline impossible for you to survive the first run in Valhalla. Also, even if you do survive, none of the dialogues really change. Once again, the legendary ghost of Sparta that ended an entire pantheon, and no diff the strongest gods in this pantheon, dies to a peasant enemy just because his eyes were glowing purple. This is the dumbest thing ever, man. I hope Kratos not dying is canon. Still, Valhalla might be my favorite part of this entire game, and the fact that it is free for everyone who owns the base game is just a giant slap to these greedy ass corporations. Last thing before we get to my final thoughts, New Game Plus is good, but I hate the fact that they don't allow you to access even unimportant areas even when you already have the tools to get there. I don't remember this being the case with God of War 4, God of War 3 didn't even have New Game Plus mode, but God of War 2 did, and it never had these sorts of restrictions. Hell, in that game you could even skip certain parts of the story in New Game Plus. That right there is true player freedom. They don't make them like they used to, man.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
So overall, God of War Ragnarok is a really good game, but with all the problems I talked about, ain't no way this is a 10 out of 10 like some meat writers pretend it is. At this point, I feel like I can trust a blind barber more than I can trust Sony to make a sequel that lives up to the original. Still, we can only hope that these people learn from their mistakes. As always, thank you so much to everyone who stuck around till the end. See you next time.